The suggestion was that we speak about Chanukah. Let's see if we can delve into an idea that underlies Chanukah, which is fundamental to all of Jewish thinking, to all of Torah, and in fact to all of life. Let's begin with a classic discussion that we have recorded between Rashi and the Ramban. Rashi makes a particular comment in a Chumash, and the Ramban asks questions and differs. And this particular example that I'm thinking of is a very acute and sharp way of being able to enter the discussion of Chanukah and what it means to us. We'll have to take a voyage through a number of areas, but let's do that together and see where it takes us. When the Torah describes the process of inauguration of the Mishkan, you know, you're all black belts here this evening, right? The Seed Graduate Seminar, I'm told, is all black belts. So we can deal with things on a black belt level, right? When the Torah describes the princes of each tribe, the Nesim, bringing the gifts that they brought in inauguration of the Mishkan, the sanctuary, the tabernacle, in the desert at the beginning of the process of the Jewish people's excursions through the travels through the desert, the Torah describes in great detail the gifts that they all brought, and then juxtaposed to that discussion, the next Pasha, Ba'aloischa, describes the mitzvah of the lighting of the menorah in the Mishkan. Aaron, the high priest, Aaron HaKohen, was given the task of lighting the menorah, and that is the section that immediately follows the bringing of the gifts of the Nesim. Rashi comments on the juxtaposition of these two sections, right? Nothing's accidental in Torah, and if these two are put next to each other, there must be a reason. What's the connection between the bringing of the gifts that signal the inception or the ignition, if you like, of this sanctuary, this Mishkan that would be the home or the meeting place of the higher Hashem's presence in the world, as it were, and ourselves? What's the connection between that and the menorah, which was one of the forms of service, or one of the elements of service in that Mishkan? Why are they put together? So Rashi says as follows, that when Aaron was watching this process of the Nesim bringing their gifts, Chal Sha'az Daito, his mind, he had a tremendous reaction of anguish or distress, and his distress was due to the fact that neither he nor his tribe, yes, not who Vashiftoi, he and his tribe, neither of them had any part to play in this particular historic moment. And therefore he felt, one has to understand obviously that Aaron's whole motivation in life, all his essence, is really nothing other than Avodas Hashem. He is the force of divine service, that's what he represents, that's what a Kohen is. And he has a tremendous reaction of distress that he's not participating at this moment. And therefore, Hashem consoles him, God as it were consoles him by saying, you have the lighting of the menorah, do not feel distressed that you don't play a part in this particular event, you have your share, as it were. And then his mind was settled, he was appeased, as it were, and he felt relieved at the knowledge that he would have his part to play. That's how Rashi presents this discussion, this event, the putting together of these parshas. That's what he says. The Ramban asks questions that really should be obvious if you think about them, and answers in a unique and unforgettable fashion. The Ramban says, and I'm paraphrasing his words, just filling them out a little bit. The Ramban says, in effect, why was Aaron feeling bad? Because there was an event taking place that he did not share. Had he forgotten that his part in the Mishkan is absolutely essential? Aaron HaKohen, the priest, the high priest, he does virtually all of the functions. He and his tribe, there's nothing in the Mishkan that happens without them. They do everything. He's the one who brings the daily korbanos, the sacrifices. He brings the ketores. The Ramban asks, why did Hashem not console him with a mitzvah, reminding him that he has the mitzvah of bringing the ketores, the incense? You know what the Ramban means, why he picks that, why he singles that out, he doesn't say. But we can fill in, perhaps, between the lines, why the Ramban mentions that particular mitzvah, the ketores, the incense, is because, particularly on a Kabbalistic level, the incense is the highest form of service or connection between us and Hashem. The word Keteres in Hebrew is based on the root meaning to connect, in fact. And the deeper commentaries explain in very great detail that the Keteres is a mitzvah of the incense. The sense of smell is always the highest of the senses. Smell is always that which is, incidentally, medically, the nerves from the nose connect directly to the brain. The first of the 12 nerves, as it were, nerve systems that come out of the brain, that's the first of them, connects directly, as it were, without intermediate junctions. But spiritually or Kabbalistically, the idea of the Keteres is that it's a direct hano, it's a direct, gives pleasure or gives a certain sense of life to the soul, to the neshama itself. That's why we smell spices when Shabbos leaves, because there's a falling of the neshama. We do it to the nose, of course. I mean, it's a long subject in its own right. The nose is that part of the body which is connected most directly to the life force. Right? You remember that when man was given life, Hashem breathed the force of life into the human being through the nose. Right? And it's no accident that the same organ, the same part of the body that is the organ that breathes is also the organ that smells. You know, we have a principle that if two functions are vested in the same part of the body, they must have a deep connection in inner meaning. And if the nose is that part of the body through which the life force is inhaled, and you remember, of course, that people used to die by sneezing. Right? The life force went in that way and went out that way. The nose is the part of the body that has the sense of smell. Smell is that faculty which tells you whether a thing is alive or not. Things that are very fresh and full of life smell very good. And things that have left their life force are smelling bad. In fact, the things that were most deeply connected to life, the higher the form of life, the worse they smell when the life force leaves. Right? And that's why the sense of smell is a very powerful manifestation of the life force itself. We know that when Mashiach comes, Chazal tell us that he will smell spiritual qualities. Right? He will smell, he'll be able to smell, as it were, spiritual qualities or levels. Right? It's a way of saying that this is the faculty that's most directly connected to life. Some have pointed out that the nose is the first part of the body. When you walk into a room, as it were, right, the nose goes for some of us a long way before the rest of us, and some, less. But the nose is the part that goes first. When the Kohen enters the Kodesh Kodashim, that is the part, that's the first part, as it were. So the Keteres, the offering of the incense, is a very high act indeed. So why did Hashem not turn to him and say, don't feel bad, you don't have a gift to bring now, but you bring the Keteres, right? Why not? Why did he comfort him with lighting the menorah? The Ramban says further, if what he was distressed by was the fact that he did not have a free will opportunity, in other words, they were bringing gifts that they were spontaneously motivated to bring, right? If that was what distressed him, how will he be comforted by being given the mitzvah of the menorah, which is a mitzvah? It's not spontaneous, it's commanded. If that's the issue, it doesn't fit. So what really was bothering him, and why was he not comforted by the other functions? Why did he not recall or draw comfort, as it were, from the memory, from the knowledge of the fact that he's the only human being who goes into the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, once a year? I mean, there's nothing higher and there's nothing more intense and nothing more permanent, if you like, than the service that the Kohen Gadol performs. So what exactly was his distress? Why had he forgotten that? Why were those functions not good enough? And why was the lighting of the menorah that which solved the problem? The Ramban says in a very moving and classic exposition, the Ramban says that in fact, and again I'm filling out his words just to give it meaning, and our ability to connect with it directly needs a little bit of explanation. The Rishonim speak very briefly. But really what Aaron was craving was not an opportunity to serve. Right? He had not forgotten that he had all the other functions to fulfill. That was not the issue. What he craved is what we call Chanukah Samizbeach. What he craved at that moment was the opportunity to be there at the beginning. The word Chanukah really means the concept of inception, or if you like, conception, the beginning of a process. Chinuch means education, the early training of a child, as it were. Means other things too, but that is one of the deep meanings of this idea. And what he was craving was the involvement at the beginning. Now, we have a principle that everything goes after the beginning. Everything goes after the way it begins. Example would be the conception of a child. The way the genes fuse, the way the genes are laid down when the child is conceived, the rest of the development of the child is nothing other than an expression, a gilu, if you like, a revelation of what is laid down in those genes. Nothing will be added later. All that happens later during the course of development of the pregnancy and later the birth is really just an expression of what's coded there in that moment. In also deep sources, there's an idea that every human expression is nothing other than a revelation of the original moment that's called Ratzon. Ratzon in Hebrew, which means desire, that adds up numerically to the same value as Makor, which means the source. Right? Actually, Shema, Hashem's name, has the same value as well. But when you conceive an idea, that flash of inspiration that we call Yesh Me'ayin, something that's a flash of an inspiration, right? That is the meaning of any action. The rest of the action, when it becomes brain activity and nerve impulses and muscular movements and so, that's really just a mechanical system giving expression when you give a gift to someone. A very meaningful act in a relationship, let's say. So the physical action is really not uniquely human. A machine probably could do it better, and a monkey could do it better. Right? The nerve impulses animals can also do. The only thing that's unique about it is the moment of conception, the moment of inception, the moment of beginning or ignition of this process. The rest is just a revelation of that moment. And if you're not there, you're really nowhere. If you're not there at the beginning, if you're not there in the formation of what the process will be, that's what he was craving. He was craving the moment of beginning. And what Hashem said to him was, the consolation that you have here is not the fact that you'll light the menorah. That was just another process of service in the Mishkan. That wasn't the issue. What I'm going to comfort you with is a different Chanukah, not this one. When you light these lights in the Mishkan now, you are presaging, you're bringing into existence now a process that will have its fulfillment many centuries from now. When your descendants, the tribe that you're concerned about, your Shevet, your tribe that has no part to play now, they will have a part to play. And that will be the Chanukah that we know, the Chanukah of the Chashmonaim. Many centuries from now, when this light has been extinguished, and the Mishkan is dark, the Mishkan, the Mikdash, is dark and defiled, contaminated, toxified, if you like, toxic, your descendants will enter. They will decontaminate, they'll purify the Mishkan, they'll relight this menorah again, and that will be a light that is greater than this one. The language that's used there is Chayecha. Hashem says to Aaron, Chayecha shelcha gedolah mishalayim. Yours is greater than theirs. And it's also mysterious. Why is his function of lighting the menorah greater than the gifts? But the function of lighting the menorah centuries later, when the Chashmonaim came into a defiled sanctuary and they lit the menorah then, is far greater than the one that's being lit in the desert now. We have to understand this. It's not simple to understand. We'll have to try and speak out why it is. But that's what Hashem said. And when he heard that his tribe, his people, his descendants, many centuries later, would be the ones who would fulfill this act of Chanukah, then he knew that his share was in fact greater than this moment of inception or beginning in the desert. Now, that's what the Ramban says. We need to delve a little bit beneath the surface here to understand what exactly is being said. Why is that greater? Why is the process of lighting a Mishkan, you know, the lighting the menorah later that the Chashmonaim did, and the Ramban makes it very clear that it's not only the lighting of the menorah then in the Mishkan, but it's the lighting of that small flame in every Jewish window that marks the centuries since then, that is greater in a sense than lighting the menorah originally in the Mishkan in the desert. That needs thought. Why? What is greater about lighting a light in your window that is a very small, insignificant seeming custom compared to the lighting of the menorah? You know, the deeper sources say that the lighting of the menorah in the Mishkan was connected with the Or HaGanuz. The Or HaGanuz is the hidden light that shone during the creation of the world. In fact, early sources tell us that one of the reasons of deep understanding of why we have 36 candles, you know, during Chanukah, if you work out the mathematics of how we light the lights, you'll notice it works out to be 36 lights. Why 36 lights? Yes? Check the mathematics.
24.
Yeah? Because we are using, each one symbolizes one of the hours during which this Or HaGanuz, this mystical light of creation shone. During those days when Adam was created, the first Shabbos that he lived experiencing that light before it was finally extinguished on Motzei Shabbos, those were the 36 hours during which this light shone. So you're talking about a light that in the Mishkan that was almost indescribable. The Gemara in Shabbos talks about it, the fact that the light that they witnessed during those years of wandering through the desert was a light that penetrated objects. Adam mistakel b'chavis, the Gemara says, you looked at a barrel, but sefer me'asher yesh ba, you could see what was inside an object with this light. You're talking about tremendous intensity of light that the Jewish people experienced then. Why is the lighting of the menorah in the second temple? The second temple was far less than the first in a sense. The Aron was missing. The sources, our tradition is, we know that the Shekhinah was absent. The Gemara says that people who saw the second temple, who had seen the first, wept when they saw the second. Not because of its lower stature compared to the spiritual intensity of the first one. So why was his greater? It needs understanding. In order to understand this, let's go through a fundamental issue in the spiritual world. This draws on very deep sources, not necessarily things that should be perhaps spoken about any occasion, but I feel we can allow ourselves to speak just a little bit about it, being last night of Chanukah. Perhaps we can just touch on it very briefly. There's an idea that's mentioned in various of our sources, in various different ways, which I'd like to summarize as far as we're able to and try and study. It's a very, very deep area. Some of it is really off limits of human understanding. But let's try to trace what we're able to and apply to our subject. What I'd like to describe to you is a very, very abstract pattern. Right? But let's lay down that pattern and then see if we can feel its expression in the things that we've discussed. There's an idea that the process of creation, the whole devolving process of the creation, happens in a process of light shining. Right? And our sources say that every time these lights shine, they shine twice. Every light shines twice. There's a first time the light shines, which is a version of its manifestation, which is perfect, very intense and perfect. Then it goes away and it shines again a second time. First of all, why is the discussion light in the first place? Why is that metaphor? It's not much more than a metaphor, but why is that currency, if you like, used? And that is because the creation of the world we view as a revelation. We view it as a revelation. The word creation in English perhaps doesn't express this entirely. The creation of the world, as we understand it, is really a revealing of that which was not revealed before. You know, the original force of creation we call yesh me'ayin, as we mentioned before, something from nothing. Many of the same sources that I'm referring to will tell you that it's not really yesh me'ayin, it's really ayin miyesh. It's really a nothing from a something. It's not that something was created from nothing, not that there was nothing before, there was everything before. What we have now is a constrained version, a restricted version of what was there before, right? So that we can see it. But why we use the expression yesh me'ayin, why we talk about something from nothing, what we mean is a revelation of something that was not revealed before. That's what we mean. That before there was no possibility of seeing this thing. The Kabbalistic sources say it's because when you light a light at midday, when you light a flame, a candle at midday, you don't see the candle. You need a darkness in order to shine a light. These are very deep ideas. But the creation of the world, the whole process, the higher worlds and this world, they unfold from each other in a process of revelation, what we call gilui. And therefore the medium of light is the medium of revelation. Therefore the deeper sources always talk about the creation in general terms. They use the concept of lights. For now that will be, let's use that idea to build our concept. When the light shines, in abstract pattern, the light shines to us. The first time is let's go through the steps as far as we're able to grasp them, and then we'll see if we can feel out the expression and the application of this thing. The first time the light shines, this is a general pattern. This applies to everything in the world. Every experience, every relationship, every phase of one's learning, the birth of a child, everything in the world is an expression of this idea. Nothing could be more important than grasping this idea in terms of grasping how things happen, how things work in the world. The first time the light shines, it shines perfectly. The reason is, it shines tremendously intensely. The reason is that it has to open up a place where there was no place before. These are very abstract ideas. But stay with me through the development of this pattern, if you like, and we'll see its application. The first time the light shines, it shines so intensely that it creates a possibility where there was none before. It has to be tremendously intense in order to do that. It breaks open, if you like. It punches open. It opens up a space where there was none before. Tremendously intense. But it's so intense, this light, it is so intense, in fact, does not belong in the place that it enters. And therefore it leaves. It leaves, it goes back to where it came from. What does it leave behind? It leaves behind a darkness, tremendously painful, aching emptiness, if you like. And the darkness is maintained in existence. The place that has been carved out, if you like, is maintained in existence by a very refined substance that's left behind. Details are not important for now. And in that space with this refined substance is the glow of a light that's left behind. It's what's called the reshem of a light, just the impression of a light. It's not the light itself, just a faint glow of what was there before. Just enough to keep this opportunity, keep this possibility open. That's all. And then the light that is left comes down a second time. But the second version, the second time that it shines, is a much lower light. It's a light that does not belong in the higher place. It's a light that belongs in the lower place. Much less intense. But this is the light that's meant to be here, and this is the one that stays. And it finds the impression, that faint glow of a light that was there before, as the preparation, if you like, the achana, the preparation, that the second light should be able to come down. If you want an analogy for this, just to show you how faint this glow of light is, perhaps the best analogy would be, when a person's not alive anymore, after the soul leaves, after the neshama leaves the body, and the person is buried, the bones are invested by what's called the havla degarmi. Havla degarmi means it's a very, very low expression of the neshama that was there, that has now left. When you enter a Beis Olam, when you go to a cemetery, right? There is a concept of the people who are buried there, their neshama, something of them remains there. We're not being sentimental when for example, when you enter a cemetery, you should put your tzitzis away, not demonstrate them. Why? Because the people who buried there would give anything to do a mitzvah. You flaunting these without understanding what it means. Those people buried there would give anything because they understand what a mitzvah means, and they can't. And therefore, there's a certain spiritual pain that is set up. It's be inconsiderate. It's a cruelty to do that. Right? Now, there's nothing sentimental in Jewish thinking. Nothing sentimental. Everything that we do has inner meaning, has reality. And therefore, if there's a concept of being sensitive to those people who buried there, right? This is not a sentimentality. It must be that there is something there. But it's a very, very faint echo of what was there before. It's only enough, the Kabbalistic sources say, that what's left in the bones is just enough to be a preparation for Tchias HaMesim. That when the neshama comes in again, it will be able to invest these bones once again because it was once there before and it's left behind a faint glow. We're talking about something very, very absolutely minimal. And the second time the neshama comes in, it invests, meets up with this light, and is the light that belongs, and that is the perfection of the system. Now, that's the pattern, right? And I'm sure you're all much wiser now for hearing this abstract pattern. But what does it mean? What does it mean? All we've done is try to put our finger on the pattern itself. Right? This is the pattern in abstraction, in isolation, without any application. Let's try to define its application and see if we can allow this to make some contact with our intelligence, with our consciousness. All of life follows this pattern. Everything in life happens once, which is perfect. And then it leaves you. Inspiration that you have in life. Now, all phases of life. There's a first phase, which is perfect, and it lasts exactly long enough that you become convinced it will last forever. And exactly at the moment you become convinced that this will always be, is when it's taken away from you. And that's why it hurts so badly when it's taken away. There's a sense of loss, of lack, of abandonment, sometimes even a despairing sense. But it's in that emptiness, it's in that void where you come into your own. The light, the second time the light shines, the second time you experience that thing, is an occasion on which you yourself have created it. The first time is given, the second time is you have to work very hard for it. The reason for this is that you're not here for free gifts. You're here to work. But if it were never shown to you, if it were never shown what this thing could be, right, you would never know what's being... Rabbi Miller, Tatz was the one who taught us this in many ways, but I'll mention one of the examples that he used to say. He used to say that, imagine you could live for one day as the person you would be if you worked on yourself for... Imagine you were given the gift. Right? The spiritual worlds opened up and they said to you, look, you can live for one day as the kind of person you would be if you worked on yourself for 20 years with full adrenaline burn, right? Absolute total intensity, working on yourself, refining your character, building your learning for 20 years. You could live now for one day like that, and then it would be taken away from you. Can you imagine what you'd experience on that day? And can you imagine how empty you'd feel when they took it away? You'd feel devastated, but you'd know what was intended. You'd be so inspired by seeing what you could be, you'd have something to work for. That's the way life is. First you get given a gift, and then it gets taken away. The reason is you need to be demonstrated, you need to be shown what's intended, what's meant. And after you've got the feeling, and it always goes just when you feel you've got it, and it will never leave you, it gets taken away. And then is a test of character. Do you have the courage and the tenacity and what it takes to battle back to that point of inspiration through your own hard work? That's the way it goes. Let's try and explore this pattern. The logic is clear. Are you with me? Anyone out there? Let's explore some applications of this idea and see how pervasive this is, how it pervades all of life. Let's start with a classical application. Yeah, this application is here in friendships, marriage, education. There's nothing that's not free of this pattern, right? It's a fundamental in the creation of the world. Therefore, it pervades every element of the world. But let's take a classical application and see if we can get a deeper grasp of this. The Gemara says that before a child is born, the child is taught the whole Torah. You know, when a child is in the womb, right? The Gemara says very, very clearly, you'll find this in the Gemara Niddah, Daf Lamed, Amud Beis. The Gemara says that the child is taught the whole Torah. An angel teaches the child the whole Torah. And a light is lit above his head. Neir daluk al roshoi. A light is lit above his head. Uboit sofer misofer alilam boit sofer. He sees mabit v'tsofer. He sees from one end of the world to the other with this light. Incidentally, that itself is mysterious. When you wish to see something, you don't shine a light on your head. If you want to see something clearly, you shine a light on the thing. Why does the Gemara say the light is lit above his head? That needs thought, this. That's what the Gemara says. Light is lit above his head, and by this light he sees from one end of the world to the other. And then, after the Gemara learns this from various sources, Psukim, for example, the fact that the child is taught the whole Torah and has this intense clarity. Some sources say it means that the child learns his own chelik in Torah. That means when you're born, you've had the experience of knowing not only the whole Torah, but you've known what your share in it is, your uniqueness. That's what the seminar is dedicated to, the sense of the uniqueness of the individual. The child is given a gift of knowledge when he's unborn. He's still a fetus, still an unborn child. Not only of the whole wisdom of the world, but exactly his part that he has to play in it. And the Gemara learns this tremendous dimension of inspiration. The Gemara says that we learn it from a pasuk, Mi yitneni ki yarchei kedem. Who could give me like those months of former days, right? Kimei alakai yishmereni, like the days in which Hashem, as it were, personally protected me. It's very hard to translate, but a classic, amazingly beautiful expression from which the Gemara learns by looking carefully at the words that we're talking about the months of pregnancy. The child is surrounded by this tremendous light, and he has this tremendous knowledge. As he's born, says the Gemara, this is the same Gemara that I'm sure you remember. It says that the child, when learning this, is positioned in a doubled up fashion. The Gemara says he's like a pinkas. Pinkas is like a little notebook or a ledger. Right? He's folded up, and the Gemara says his elbows on his knees, and his head between his knees, his elbows on his heels, doubled up, like a little folded book. And as he's born, he is, with all this wisdom, but an angel comes with satroy al piv, gives him a blow on the mouth. The child forgets all of this wisdom and is born in the world as a simple child with no wisdom. He has to spend the rest of his life fighting to get back some vestige, some trace, if he can, of that Torah wisdom that he was given as a gift when he was a child. Can you see the two phases? First given it as a gift when he's a child, taken away. Right? The blow, the Maharal says that a blow is always a painful revelation of deficiency. The expression of, like it says, En lecha kol esev va'esev, you don't have a single blade of grass. She'en loy malach barakia, it doesn't have an angel in the spiritual world. She'make oisa, that strikes it, va'omer loy gedal, and says grow. In other words, every opportunity, every invitation, if you like, to grow is affected by a blow, which is a demonstration of the deficiency, the lack of that growth that you now become aware of. That's the invitation to grow. As the child is born, he gets a blow on the mouth. Perhaps some other time we can talk about why it's a blow on the mouth. It's also a mystery. You know, I can show you that medically, when you want to make somebody forget something, you don't hit them on the mouth, you hit them on the head. So why is it described as a blow on the mouth? That's for homework. Okay? That's for homework. It's not a free gift, this seminar, right? There's work involved. Right? But it's a blow, let it be that for the moment. There's a blow involved, the child forgets it. The question we need to ask here, many questions here, but the fundamental question is, why is a child taught the whole Torah in order only to forget it? Yeah, I don't know what angels charge per hour, you know, for instruction, but probably it's a valuable, you know, expensive commodity, right? Here's this angel detailed to teach the child the whole Torah while he's a fetus, and as soon as he's born, when he really will need it, it's taken away. Why is that? And the answer is amazing and fundamental. The answer is the child doesn't forget. What happens is all of that Torah that he learned as a fetus is driven inward into his consciousness. You remember that faint echo of a light that's left? That's what the child's born with. You are born as a child in the world with swimming around in your consciousness, somewhere just out of reach, all that you need to know. It's all there. It's been there. You were there once before. You know, how can we best express this? You see, if you didn't have it within you, you'd never be able to relate to it later. What's your motivation to seek spiritual wisdom? What's your thrill when you discover an aspect of spiritual wisdom? You know what the thrill is? There's a deep resonance that's set up with that which is with... You know, when you hear something spiritually true, if you've ever lived through this, you'll know that you do not have the sensation that you're learning something. You have the sensation that you're recognizing something. The truth is, that's exactly what's happening. You're striking a chord. There's a deep... In fact, that's how you know it's true. How do you know that something's true when you hear it and it rings true? You know how you know? Because there's a deep resonance that's set up with your primordial innate Torah. And it strikes that chord and it brings it out. Right? It's like dipping a bucket into a deep well and it brings to expression that which was dormant within you. There are many applications of this idea. One is that people who learn Torah have experience called a chidush. Chidush means you're learning, person's learning, and they learn a certain Torah material, and it suggests something to them that's novel. Right? Chidush means something new. And they perhaps note it down, and if you do this repeatedly, you could write a whole book of your Torah chidushim. The question is, how can you make up Torah? What a chutzpah. You make up Torah. It's Hashem's Torah. You can't make it up. The answer is you're not making it up. All you're doing is drawing out from within the Torah which is yours, which was there before. That's the idea. The child is given the whole sense of inspiration, of excitement, of knowledge. He has it all clear. But then it's taken away. All that's left is that faint echo, that faint intimation that you have. That's somewhere just out of reach. You've been there once before. You've seen it. You've been there. You know it. And when it happens, there's that resonance that, yeah, that's what it is. Why is it done this way? Again, because you need to be shown what's meant, and then you need to be deprived of it so that you can feel the pain and the ache and the lack, and so you can have the credit of building yourself. You're in the world not to be given gifts. You're in the world to achieve it yourself. And that's the pattern. That's the pattern. You see the application? Free gift, taken away, pain, lack, humiliation even, not knowing anything. And then it has to be learnt again. You see this pattern in so many ways. I don't have time now to go into all the applications, but, there's a deep idea in the spiritual world that you can cut a pattern anywhere and see the same elements. This is based on the notion that since the world is all a manifestation of Hashem's oneness, it follows that every part contains the whole. It's a subject in its own right. Every part contains the whole. It's the reason, for example, why in the human body, every cell contains the genes of the whole body. You know that? Do you know that? In the human body, the body is built in such a way that every cell contains an entire complement of genes, even though only one part is working. In your toes, for example, you know that in the cells of your toes, you don't have just the genes for toes. That would be the natural engineering way to do it, right? You take a genetic complement, you cut up the genes for toes and send them down to the toes. Let them get busy making toes. The genes for eyes, you send to the eyes, but it's not that way. The way the body works is all of the genes are copied and sent to every cell. Only what happens in your toes is the part that says toes operates and the rest is dormant, fortunately. And your eyes, the part that makes eyes is operating, the rest is dormant, right? That's an amazing. Medical science has no way of, it's one of the greatest mysteries in medicine. It's so mysterious they don't even talk about it. You know that? What happens is a cell in conception, the cell forms, splits into two identical halves with two identical genetic complements. Splits into 4 identical cells. 8 identical cells, 16, 32, 64, and you can prove that they're identical. Now you can prove it. With a micropipette, you can take out one of them, put it in a separate dish, and it will grow not 1/16 of a person, or 1/4 or 1/8, it will grow an entire person. And you can keep doing that. When you get to a certain number of cells, for some unknown reason, some of them start becoming the head, and some start becoming feet. And no one knows why. Because all of them have exactly the same genes. No one knows how each cell knows to make all of those dormant except what it is. And you hear this amazing thing, right? This is so marvelous and miraculous that they don't even talk about it. There is research these days that's beginning to be done on how some vague notion of an explanation, but it's very, very mysterious. But the result is that when the body is fully formed, every cell has the genes of the entire body. Only your toes are busy making toes, and the rest is dormant. And your eyes are making eyes, which means, of course, that you could take any cell from any part of your body and regrow yourself entirely. You could make a double of yourself. Why anyone would want to do that beats me. But if you'd want to do that, you could make a copy of yourself from any cell in the body, right? Because all the cells have everything. That's an expression of the spiritual axiom that every part contains the whole. The application that we need from this is that if you take any process, any element of life, and chop it, cut a piece out, in that segment that you've taken, you'll see 2 phases also. Right? For example, the neshama before it's born, tremendous inspiration, brought down to a dismal physical world. Or pregnancy, first phase, and then subsequently. Or the child who's born. When a child is born in the world, there are 2 phases, childhood and adulthood. Childhood is an inspired time. Children have a sense of the world being larger than life. Children have no sense of limitation. You ask a 5-year-old what he wants to be when he grows up. It's like a impossible conglomeration of, because he's got no sense of limitation. Children think that the world, yes? When children are 5, they think they can do anything. When they're 15, they're tremendously inspired. Every 18-year-old youngster, especially men, women don't have this problem, it's another subject for another time. Men have this problem. is that every 18-year-old youngster, every 18-year-old male in Western society is convinced that he's going to be the world's greatest everything. There's no question about it. But when he's 28 and 38 and 48 and 58, and then he realizes that he's not the world's greatest anything, so then it's a problem. Then it's a problem. What most men, there's only two options. Either they become morbidly depressed, or what most men do is they keep right on fantasizing that they are the world's greatest everything. They just, just haven't had time to do it, but, they'll get there. I mean, this is a male problem. Why it's a male problem is also fascinating, fits into our subject. That's because maleness is the first phase of inspiration, like the conception. The conception of a child, which is the male phase, only the beginning. But the female phase is the building and construction. The male contribution to a child is only a genetic code. It's only half a genetic code. The entire construction of the child is the female phase. And therefore men tend, do you understand, it's a deep subject, men tend to the phase of inspiration. Men tend to the phase of childishness. Somebody showed me a book of Eastern mysticism. Eastern mysticism. Are you allowed to mention that at a seed seminar? A book of Eastern mysticism. And on the subject of education, I saw a remarkable statement there. This man, in wherever he is in the East, he writes, a woman is a woman, but a man is a child always. Amazing thing. I didn't know in Japan they had these, in China they had these problems. But that is what it says. Maleness tends to the phase of excitement and multi-potential energy. Right? And femaleness tends to the pole of constraint and reality. Right? That's part of the expression of this idea. But be that as it may, the first phase is a phase of tremendous inspiration. This is why men, of course, are always playing with toys. Men, when you see men of 50, they're playing with the same toys they were playing with when they were 15. This is a bit bigger and more expensive, but basically the same. Say women don't have that problem. That's what it is. But again, it's a very unpleasant subject. So let's leave it. The point is that I personally think it's a misprint. But anyway, the point is that there's a first phase of inspiration, there's a second phase of reality, right? In which is the phase of work. The phase of work. The female phase in building the child is a phase of work. Right? The mother builds the body of the child. Medically, it's known even that even if the mother's deficient in certain elements, the child, she gives them to the child. That's a phase of genuine work and genuine building to construct what must be constructed, even though it's a confined or constrained version, but it's a real version. That's what it is. And as children begin to grow, you see the sense of limitation creeping in. I was walking to shul with one of my sons. I'm not going to mention which one because he certainly would not forgive me. But when he was 6, we were walking to shul, and Friday evening he turns to me and he says to me, Abba, after a couple of minutes of silence, which usually means you have to take his temperature, he says to me, Abba, I'm not sure if I'm going to marry Debbie or Frida. Now, these were our two little neighbors at the time. So I said to him, yes. And then he said to me, but the problem is, looks at me with concern. He says, the problem is, Abba, whichever one I marry, the other one's going to be so upset. I said, okay, fine. So then we get to shul, we're walking up the stairs, and he stops cold on the steps. He looks at me with real worry, and he says to me, but Abba, whoever I marry, all the others are going to be so upset. so okay, for the first time in his young life, he's starting to realize that the first phase of all multi-potential, everything being possible, suddenly, somewhere or other it has to close down into what can be done. That's what it is. But it's always, that's always the way it is. It's a painful exercise to close the circle. It's a painful exercise to narrow down and focus on that which can be done. That's always the difficulty. But that's where reality happens. That's where reality happens. Maleness is always a person who goes on vacation. He wakes up with one more day left on vacation. Right? And there's 6:30, he's lying in bed. He's got many options. He can climb the mountains, swim in the rivers, canoe in the lake, and he can ride the horses. Can't do all of that in one day. He'll make a choice. So the female personality, female type personality, gets up and chooses one of them and does it. The male type personality lies in bed frustrated half the day, trying to work out which one would be the best, and ultimately chooses one, and the whole time during that activity remains convinced that any of the others would have been better. That's because the immaturity is unable to, doesn't want to give up that opportunity. You ever see a child standing outside a delicatessen with enough money in his grubby little hand to buy one of the 25 different buns in the window? Amazing, ecstatic child. He stands there relishing the thought of each one. Finally makes a choice, and as he's about to hand his money over to the man and receive his bun, all 24 others start to glow brightly. That's what happens. That's what happens. If you want to torture a child, I'm not suggesting that's a Jewish activity, but if you want to torture a child, you give a child an ice cream. When he's holding his ice cream, you give him another one. When he's holding both ice creams, you offer him a third. Right? You'll see. you'll have a pile of ice cream and tears on the floor because a child can't understand that there's a limitation to what can be done. And that's what it is. That's what it is. The first light is the light of perfection. It's all there. It's multi-potential. It's infinite. The second light is very, very limited, but it's the one that you make real. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. Childhood's inspired phase, and later in life, all those potentialities are not fulfilled. It's only the narrow range of the ones that need to be, that must be. That's maturity. Maturity means choosing the ones that can be and must be and doing them well. That's the pattern of life. And you see this in so many ways in Torah. I don't want to speak for too long, but let's just take perhaps one other indication of this, is that the formation of the Jewish people follows the same pattern. The way Rabbi Miller used to explain it was that you see that the going out of Egypt, the going out of Mitzrayim, we call it Pesach. Pesach means to leap over levels. It means in one moment, in one night, reaching an infinite level. The Jewish people see on that night, you know, the Maharal says that the 10 plagues in Egypt proceeded in reverse order of the sayings of creation. You know that? The Maharal speaks it out in detail. That the sayings, the 10 sayings of creation are reversals. They're reversed in the 10 plagues. The reason is that the world is created in 10 sayings. You start with an infinite center, and you start building layers, 10 mystical layers around that till you have your structure. But when you purify something, the plagues in Egypt were a purification process. They were detoxifying, if you like, decontaminating the damage that the Egyptians had done to the whole spiritual world. You must then peel the layers away from the outside in, so it's a reversal. What's the first of the sayings of creation? Bereshis, in the beginning, moment of firstness. What's the 10th of the plagues? Killing of the firstborn, destruction of that firstness. What's the second of the sayings of creation? Creation of light. What's the second last of the plagues? Darkness. The Maharal, this is simple Chumash. Maharal works through these in reverse sequence, demonstrating how each one is what does it mean? It means that first night, that last night in Egypt, that night of Makas Becheres, was a reaching back to the moment of creation. Hashem alone, as it were. The word Bereshis means a creation before even a statement of creation. Not according. Ani v'loi malach, ani v'loi saraf. It means Hashem comes into Egypt and he destroys the firstborn, him in his own essence, as it were, without any layers, right? Without any. Imagine and the Gemara says, the Chazal tell us that when they reached the sea 7 days later, what they'd seen in Egypt was dwarfed compared to what they saw later. 50 times more, 200 times, 250, much more at the sea. Tremendous revelation. They saw 7 spiritual worlds. They saw the lowliest person there, saw more than the greatest prophet. And then what happened? They were dropped in the desert. They were taken from that pinnacle of human experience and they were put into a desert. The message was, you like this? Now you do it. You see how it's been done? Now you move through the desert. Now you go painfully, slowly, one step after another. Not all at once. Now you go one step after another. You want to reach Sinai? This is the process. First I demonstrate. First I lift you up. Eagle's wings. Then I put you in. The word desert, you know, in Hebrew, midbar, is based on the same root as dabar, dibur, speech. Dibur in Hebrew really means not speech, but it means a logical process. It means a process of control, taking from a spiritual world and manifesting, right? Yad ber amim tachtenu. It means midbar is a place that's mufka from dibur. Midbar is one of those Hebrew words that's a word and its opposite in the same word, right? Davar v'hipucha, the thing and its opposite in the same word. Dibur means, the whole concept of speech is a logical process, right? One sound married to the next development. And midbar is a place where there's no landmarks. It's just a wasteland. That's what it is. So they're first taken from the heights of spiritual experience and they're dropped in a desert. Desert means death forces. There's no life. There's no water. The message is, this is how it's done. You get it for free. Then it's taken away. You know, some sources say that on the first night of Pesach, you can have whatever you want for free. It's a Leil Shimurim. You don't need to defend yourself. There's no protection. If I'm permitted, just a word of Kabbalistic insight. The Kabbalists say that on the first night of Pesach, we don't have to daven Ma'ariv. You know that? There's no Ma'ariv prayer that's necessary. Because the first night of Pesach is an automatic occasion. Everything happens by itself. We don't need to build anything in the spiritual world. You know why we daven Ma'ariv first night of Pesach, they say? Just to be part of it, that's all. Other nights of the year, when we do it, we make it happen. We make certain things happen. First night of Pesach, the only reason we do it is just to ride the wave. Right? We want to get up and surf on that wave. That's what it is. First night of Pesach. But then comes the hard part. Then you get Sfiras HaOmer, you get the difficult time. That's why Nisan, the month of Pesach, means miracles. Nisan is miracles, Nes. Nisan is gematria of Nisim, miracles. It's amazing, it's miraculous. Then comes Sfiras HaOmer, Iyar, difficult time. You know the Sefer Yetzirah says that Nisan is the right leg and Iyar is the left leg. That's the opposite side. The zodiac of Nisan is the sheep. You know what that is? A passive animal, it's just lead. What's Iyar? The bull, ox, that develops, it has to develop its own willful strength. And Sivan, the third month, the giving of the Torah, To'imi, Gemini, harmony of the two. First the demonstration, then the lack of demonstration and support, you have to do it yourself, and then the harmonizing of the two, Hashem and As, Moshe and Aaron, the two luches, Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebal Peh. That is what Gemini is. You know what the analogy is? When a man teaches his child to walk, he lifts him up by the hands. And as he holds him, the child takes his first step. It's an exhilarating moment, amazing moment. Child is walking, he's upright. But not only that, he can't fall because Abba's holding his hands. What an amazing moment. And just as he begins to enjoy the exhilaration of that moment, that's when Abba lets go. That's when Abba lets go. And then he finds himself standing there terrified and lonely and abandoned by the one who put him into this situation. But that's when he learns to walk. That's when he learns to walk. When he takes that first frightened and lonely step, that's when he learns to walk. And then he can rush into his father's arms and understand that in that moment of seeming abandonment was manifest a greater love than when his Abba picked him up. That's not easy. He doesn't feel that at the time. But that's what it is. That's the process. Given for free, assurance, tremendous, and then it gets taken away. But that's when you learn to walk. That's the process. That is the process. And all of life is that way. We don't have time now to go into all, but that is the process of life. It pervades every aspect of life. There's nothing that's free of it. Permit me just one more brief example. Marriage. We can speak about it here because Baruch Hashem, people who had a seed seminar all are experts at this. Nobody has any problems in this area. It's the outside world that doesn't know how to do this. But marriage is that. Marriage is two phases. Marriage has two phases. The first phase is free. Male-female relationship, the way it happens initially, is free. It's complete. It's an exhilaration that's given for free. In the secular world, they call it romance. We have no word for that in Hebrew. Rav Dessler used to say that if there's no word for a thing in the Torah, it's an illusion. If the Torah names a thing, every word in the Torah, every davar word in the Torah becomes davar, the object in the world. If there's something in the world that's experienced and you look for a reference in the Torah and you don't find the word of creation there, it's an illusion. Someone has painted it up on the screen of reality, but it's not projected from the source. And romance, we have a word for love. The word ava in Hebrew means giving. It's from the root to give. But the word romance, we don't have a word for that. Romance it's an illusion. There's been no giving. The secular world, the pinnacle of romance, what they call it, love at first sight. You can't have love at first sight. There's been no giving. Rabbi Dessler used to say, in a famous exposition, love is where you give, not where you receive. That's why parents always love their children more than the children love their parents. Parents always love their children more than the children love their parents because the giving goes in that direction. So what kind of love can there be at first sight? What happened? What is this romantic thing that they describe? Is, this person walks into the room and there's a music sort of wafts in from the one angle. There's a vague sound of bells from someplace else, There's a sort of tight-chested feeling. What is this? What is this thing? There's been no genuine relationship. That's the thing. When you get after marriage, about 2.5 hours after marriage, is when, that goes. Again, it's more of a male problem than a female problem. But that's what it is. The first thing is given for free. It's just given as a come-on, just an electric experience to get in. So a young man says to me, Rabbi, his knuckles are white on the table, says, I married the wrong girl. So I said to him, how long have you been married? He said, 2.5 months. I said, why is she the wrong girl? He said, when I used to look at her in the beginning, I couldn't breathe. I used to be with her in the beginning, to look at her, I couldn't breathe. Now, 2.5 months later, breathing fine. I said, I'd explained to him, that's the way it's designed to be. I had to tell him that 2.5 months after marriage, if you're having trouble breathing, you've got asthma. But that's the way it's designed. The first phase always is that phase of inspiration. Right? The tragedy today, of course, the tragedy is that they teach young people this in what they present to them is romance and they call it love. That's what they do. Yeah. So they train that way. So when they get into the phase where a little work is necessary, where the initial inspiration, the flash of, when that's taken away, so they think they've made a mistake. They don't understand. No one told them that the real thing is built where the work has to be done. It's a tragedy. And it's the result of being in a quick fix generation. It's a generation where today if you buy a machine that, if you have a machine today that cannot do 50 billion functions in 2 microseconds, they call it slow, you know that? They call it slow. You can't give it away, you know that? I don't know about you people in this country, but I presume it is the same when I grew up. We used to make tea. You tell this to a youngster today, they won't believe it. We used to make tea for my parents. We used to make tea. We used to pour boiling water into a teapot and then pour it out. Then you'd pour in fresh boiling water and put tea leaves in and wait for it to draw. You cover it with a thing. Then while that was happening, you poured hot water into a teacup to warm it, then you poured that out. Then you put it... Today, the fellow's dipping a thing and looking at his thing, and if he could do it intravenously, he would, you know, I mean... Today they have it freeze-dried, you know. It takes too long to dip the bag. It's got to be freeze-dried. Every child who has a computer should be made to plant a garden. Every child, you get your child a computer, you make him plant a garden. Because he gets used to that quick fix thing, he's going to be a quick fix person. The Gemara says you learn emunah, ne'emonis, you learn loyalty, you learn from the agricultural world, because it's a whole season distant that you have to wait for the result. You have to do that. But this is what it is. This is what it is, a quick fix. Let's go back to Torah, and see if we can identify this and see if we can come back to our Chanukah beginning. The whole Torah unfolds this way. Again, if you think it through yourself, you'll see that there's no place in Torah is not like this. Take just one example. The two luchos. You know, the tablets were given twice. Strike a chord. The first ones were miraculous. Isn't it obvious when you see it? When you start to see the pattern, there's no place free of this. The first tablets, the first luchos abris, they were miraculous. You could see through them from one side to the other, and they were not backwards. The letters hang suspended miraculously. The Maharal says that the oral and written Torah was all written on those tablets. But those broke. The first light doesn't last. The first light's taken away. And the second psalachah, you make these. The second are hewn by human hand. That's a very different story. But those are the ones that last. Can you see this pattern? And it goes on and on, this pattern. The temple, the Beis HaMikdash. The first one, the Shekhinah was present. The first one, the Aron was present. The second one was devoid of that. And that's when Chanukah happened. Chanukah was lighting the lights of the second occasion. The first, this is the important thing to understand. Because we are children of that darkness. We are children of that darkness. That is our function. Our function is that second light. We don't see the first light. The first light was what happened in the Mishkan when Aaron stood up to light that menorah for the first time. There was a cosmic light. It was a cosmic light. You had to be blind not to see that. The giving of the Torah was so intense and so infinite that people had no free will even. But when did they accept Torah? Not then. Many centuries later at Purim, when there was a darkness and nothing was revealed, that was a receiving of Torah. The first one was a free experience, just a tremendous blast of intensity. Right? Why? To fire the Jewish people up to a level that many centuries later people would be prepared to be burned to death en masse, right? Rather than kiss a crucifix and go home. Yeah, no, what a fire, you have to have searing through your veins to achieve that. You're talking about Jews. People, I think a very good reason why there'd be a reason to stay alive here and not do this thing, and they didn't. Tremendous inspiration. That was the ignition that happened then. And that's what Aaron was standing and witnessing. When these people were bringing their gifts, that was the moment of setting this fire. It was a tremendous moment, but Hashem said to him, there's a greater moment. And the greater moment is when your children will do it in a phase of darkness, when they do it. This one I'm doing. Because when it comes to a phase of darkness, when you don't see that first light, you know the Sfas Emes says an amazing thing. You know the menorah that burned in the Mishkan was hidden. You know, in the Beis HaMikdash, you know it was hidden. It was hidden away. I'll tell us that when King Solomon built the temple, he made hidden caverns underground so that when the temple was destroyed, they'd be able to hide away the vessels. And King Yoshiyahu Melech, he lived just one generation before the destruction. Before the temple was destroyed, he hid, in fact, the Aron, he hid the menorah in that underground cavern. And what was used in the temple later were others. The Sfas Emes says, in that underground cavern in the hills of Jerusalem today, where that menorah is buried that no one sees, the Ner Maravi is still burning. That western light is still burning. But it's burning in a hidden place, we don't see that. What he means is that here there's a light still burning, even though often we don't see that. That's what he means. That will not go out, that light. But the rekindling of that light, that has to be done with all the pain of all the work and all the work that it takes to fill the agony of that void. Right? That's what Hashem said. What's happening now, what you're witnessing now, is a ride on eagle's wings. That's what you're experiencing now. This is an unforgettable experience that begins the process of the Jewish people, but it will not last. This light that I'm lighting now will not last. But the light that your children will light, many centuries from now at Chanukah time, that light will last until Mashiach comes. It may look only like a very, very small glow in a Jewish window in a generation of tremendous lack of consciousness and tremendous darkness, intellectual and emotional and on all other levels, but that is a light that will last till Mashiach. And therefore, that's the understanding. Understanding is that Jewish history has two phases. There's the phase of Torah Shabbat, the written law, which is all prophecy. Prophets so lived on an elevated, the world was incandescent, luminescent with spirituality when prophets lived. People think prophets lived, there were people walking around who could tell you something about the future. Not like it. They were only the highest peaks of the Jewish people. The rest, the whole people lived on a level of luminescent spirituality. And when prophecy left the world went dark. The world went dark. And that's when the sages began their creation of Torah. That's when the sages came along and said, Heim amru shleisha dvarim. Until then, no human being said anything. All human beings did was transmit Torah. The prophets simply transmitted. We have no record. You know that? We have no record of any creative Torah ideas that were said by Yechezkel or by Jeremiah or by Yoshua. They didn't say anything. They transmitted it whole. That's what happened. But when the lights went out and human beings had to up and do their own, so then the generation of the oral law came into existence. That's why Chanukah is called the Yom Tov of the oral law. And that's what we mean when we say Chacham Adif Minavi, that a wise man is greater than a prophet. He's not greater in terms of what he sees. He sees nothing compared to what a prophet sees. But he's greater because he's lighting the second light. What the prophet does is sanctify himself so that he can be a vessel for the first light. But what a sage does is he builds himself to ignite his own second light. And that's a light that is incomparable. That's a light that's incomparable. And therefore the message for us of Chanukah is that we live in the second phase. Our problem is the darkness, but that's who we are. Our problem is the darkness, and our challenge is to kindle that light, is to light that light in the darkness. We don't see that first light. To hanker off to that and wish that you could be picked up again, you feel the Father's hands supporting you. That's not our function. Our function is to break the barriers and to transcend that darkness. That's what it is. And therefore, like that small light in a window that we do, which is that which will last until Mashiach comes, you have to remember, when you're doing that, you're doing the work of lighting this small light, and to bring that out. So not easy at all. That's the whole idea. That's what it is. And therefore, the message perhaps we can take home with us from this Chanukah, from the seminar, from Chanukah, is that it is a difficult world. It's a very bleak and black time in Jewish history, and it's not guaranteed to get better soon, unfortunately. I hope it doesn't get worse. There's no guarantees. But this is where we come into our own. The blacker it gets, the smaller a light you need. The less heroic you need to be. You're more heroic in one sense, but the less you need to produce. To light a light, the greater the darkness, the further a small light shines. And that's our function, is to remember what that first light was, right? To learn it and study it, and bring that into the phase of the second light, which is what Chanukah teaches.